Hi, my name is Doctor Warrick Bishop and welcome to my podcast and videocast station today. I'm really delighted to have sharing with me Dr. Fiona Foo, a cardiologist from Sydney, who's both a general and interventional cardiologist. That means she puts in stents. She has a particular and specific interest in women and heart disease, sports cardiology, and what we're going to cover a fair bit today is climate change and cardiovascular disease. Fiona, thank you so much for coming along.
Thank you for inviting me.
Look, before we kick off, I'm always intrigued around how we all have our own journey to get to where we are and the sort of areas of medicine that we're in. So maybe let's find out a little bit about you, Fiona, just so that those listening have a bit of a sense of where you've come from and why you are where you are.
Yeah, so I think I was quite inspired when I did physician training, so which is what we have to do before we get into cardiology. I did several rotations and particularly I enjoyed my cardiology training. And so I think I just had really aspiring mentors at Concord Hospital. And, I still know them and they're the ones who kind of like really inspired me to do cardiology. And it's one of those specialties where you can actually make a difference and you can actually fix things. I almost became a hematologist, but I thought I just couldn't handle the fact that I couldn't fix it. So, so that was why I did cardiology.
Did you, are you from Sydney originally? Is that where you did your...
Actually, I'm from Perth. So I came over to Concord to do my physician training and then I actually went back to Perth to do my cardiology training. And then, the mentors there again inspired me to do interventional training, which I went overseas to Canada, so Edmonton in Canada, and then Glasgow, Glasgow in Scotland to do my further interventional cardiology training.
I certainly had a little bit of a similar story. I was very interested in hematology, but turned out I was colorblind and I couldn't see the stains. So as they showed these things and were sharing, brown or magenta degranulate, I couldn't see it. So I was lucky enough to drop into cardiology when we had clot busting medications hit the scene, where angioplasty balloons hit the scene, where coronary care units were a hive of activity. And just like you, I thought, wow, I love this chance to fix people up. So I can certainly resonate with that. Yeah. Look, one of your interests is climate change medicine. And I think for the sake of this conversation, let's call it climate change and environment, because we would all agree that not only is the climate changing and we're aware of it, but also our environment is changing. So one of the things that we're aware of are the modifiable risk factors for our own health. But would you like to talk to some of the modifiable risk factors to do with climate and our environment that we often don't think about or we should be thinking about more?
I mean, I think part of what you're saying is really that I don't think people recognize that the environment is actually a modifiable risk factor. But it is one of the three types of modifiable risk factors. So the other two are behavioral and metabolic. So the environment, and this includes air pollution. So air pollution is actually the fourth highest modifiable risk factor for cardiovascular disease worldwide. It's actually higher than smoking. And then there's a non-optimal temperature. So both extreme heat, but also extreme cold weather will increase cardiovascular disease. And then lastly, other environmental pollutants. So things like toxic metals, but more recently, there's a lot of talk about manufactured chemicals, so PFAS and phthalates, and then all the microplastics and nanoplastics. And there was a paper published a few months ago that showed how if you find microplastics, they found microplastics in carotid arteries, and these people had a significantly higher risk of death and stroke and heart attacks. So I think all these environmental pollutants, as well as climate change, increasing air pollution, increasing extreme weather events, these are all increasing particular cardiovascular disease, but they also have a lot of other adverse health outcomes.
So I think it's super important that you're mentioning these and describing these as modifiable risks. And I'm imagining that there are people listening to that thinking, well, modifiable must mean I can do something about it. And this is critical because I think we have to have some ownership. We have to look to governments and leaders as well, but we have to have a role ourselves. I'm going to break this down into what can we do for ourselves and what can we do for our community, our environment, our country. But when it comes to things like air pollution, are there recommendations you give to patients in terms of driving in their car and using air conditioners and recycling the air, or getting fresh air, or opening windows, or running air conditioners at home? I'll get you to speak to maybe air pollution and what an individual can do for themselves first.
So I think, I guess the first important thing is to realize that air pollution, is a significant cause of mortality, just not even cardiovascular disease, so mortality worldwide. It's nearly 6.7 million in 2019, but there's even bigger figures. So nearly more than 8 million just due to outdoor air pollution alone causes deaths. So, and more than 50% of this is due to cardiovascular disease. So that's both ischemic heart disease or heart attacks, as well as strokes. So that's the most important thing. So that's air pollution, and air pollution caused particularly by the burning of fossil fuels, so coal, oil, and gas. But there's also wood burning and forest fires, as well as traffic exhaust. So all of these types of air pollution go into you breathe it in, it goes into your lungs, and then it can, if it's very small, or something called PM2.5, particulate matter, it goes into your bloodstream. Okay, and then it can attack every single organ of the body, including the heart. So it's a big risk factor for heart disease, particularly heart attacks. So in terms of what you can do.
So before we go too far there, I'll just come back. Those particular matters, particles, are they little bits of unburnt carbon, or are they dust, or are they non-specific remnants? Is that?
They're very fine particulate matter from burning of such as burning of fossil fuels, wood fires, and etc. Those kind, so they're tiny particles, and it's described by their diameter. So PM 2.5, so particulate matter 2.5 is 2.5 microns in diameter. So it's tiny, very, very small. If you compare it to like the size of like sand, I can't remember the figures. Let me.
Fraction of the size of sand.
Yeah, there's also, they talk about PM10, which is less than 10 microns, and then even smaller than PM2.5 is ultrafine. So they're so small that that's how they can get into inhale and get into the bloodstream.
And when they're in the bloodstream, these particles would they tend to kick off an inflammatory response? Is that what we're seeing?
Yeah, and multiple mechanisms by which it can cause both acute as well as chronic effects on every single organ of the body. Like a number of different pathways, like oxidative, inflammatory, all these different pathways to cause all these effects, particularly from the heart point of view.
And I'm guessing that if they're in the bloodstream, there's wear and tear within the arteries, these particles can end up in there and be contributory. I'm sort of imagining that if they are in the bloodstream and filtering through the body, do they get caught up in the kidneys? Are kidneys, for example, more likely to be affected by this sort of particulate matter process?
So every organ is affected. Yeah, so every single organ is affected by air pollution. So not just the heart, you've got particularly respiratory illnesses, so in the lungs, but also heart disease, kidney disease, lung disease, liver disease, cancers. It can cross the placenta and go into the fetus. So it's a big risk for pregnant women. And we're talking every type of pollution, and particularly, I guess, in Australia, we don't think we're exposed to high air pollution, but every time there's a bushfire or backburning, you're exposed to significant amounts of air pollution. Particularly, I've measured the air quality when we've had backburning, like a forest fire near us, and then it's extremely high. We were sometime last year we were third highest in the world, in terms of how bad our air quality is. So. Wow. So I think, people don't realize that, because it's so invisible. We don't realize that it actually does affect every organ of the body. And it's not just it's not just now. So you've got acute effects, but you've also got this chronic effect, over years of exposure. And unfortunately, pretty much more than 90% of the worldwide are exposed to annual PM 2.5 levels that are above the WHO guidelines. So yeah, so it is a problem, and Australia is not immune to it. Like, we're all exposed to this, and some places you'll be exposed more. For example, the cities, or when there's lots of traffic, you're going to be exposed to a lot more air pollution from that point of view. So
I think that flagging of bushfires is really valuable, because I think there's barely a place in Australia that's not familiar with the sort of season of bushfires we get, and there's certainly many places in Australia that are impacted by it. Look, I broke your flow before. You're about to talk about what people can do themselves to look after their health in that space.
So I think the two parts there are two parts of this. So I think before you talk about what they can do to protect themselves, one of the things you can do that will help both reducing our air pollution and also help your heart health is actually changing to renewable energy sources. So if you changed all your electrical, like your heat and cooling and cooking needs from burning fossil fuels, so from using coal, oil, and gas to solar energy or wind energy, then you're reducing emissions, but you're also improving the air pollution. So I think that's one of the biggest things that you can do that will help both the environment and your own health. If you can't put solar panels, on your roof, there's other ways you can do it. Like, you can change to an energy provider that provides energy purely from renewables. So that's one thing. And there's another thing about, so the other thing is getting rid of gas. So gas is quite a big problem. Not as much, it does increase heart disease to an extent, but it's actually asthma and respiratory illness that domestic gas stoves significantly increase. The gas production, so the big places where they produce gas, those have been shown to increase deaths, lung problems, asthma, as well as heart disease. But it's domestic gas use that really increases your risk of asthma. So that's the other thing. So electrifying everything, including gas, will definitely help your health, not just your heart health, but like your lung health. And then when it comes to reducing your exposure to air pollution, so with bushfires, so I have an air quality app, so I think it's always good to know when there's alerts, when there's bushfires. And so you need to staying indoors, not exercising outdoors. If you are outside, I would use a proper N95 mask. And then having air filters inside are quite useful as well. So you can now get these kind of big, it's like having a dehumidifier, but as an air filter, and you can actually see, like, it actually filters that air inside. Making sure all the seals of your doors are, good as well, so you don't get that outdoor polluted air inside as well. So like simple measures like that. And as you mentioned before about the cars, and never have your car, like the aircon, like you always have it recirculating, so never having from outside. And that brings me to the whole traffic exhaust thing as well too. So traffic exhaust is another type of air pollution.
Just before you move on to traffic exhaust, one of the things that you said there was, which grabbed my attention, and others might be wondering as well, as you flagged that gas refineries produce emissions that are particularly problematic for people with lung disease. So you're obviously talking about a different kind of or range of pollutants or number of pollutants in that situation. Is that correct?
I think it's like the whole oil and gas production, like just the whole digging up in that whole big refinery kind of area. It was just a massive study they talked about in the US and the health issues with oil and gas production in the US. So I'll be honest, I don't know all the kind of different, I guess, different types of gases. So when we talk about air pollution, it's not just PM 2.5, it's all like other air pollutants. So there's ozone and nitrous oxide and nitrous dioxide and methane. So domestic gas is mainly methane. So there's a lot of other, all these different components of air pollution, which is quite complex, and I'm not an expert in that, but so this is a problem. There's like so many different types of air pollution. It's not just PM 2.5. PM 2.5 is the most studied, and definitely in heart disease, it's like the most important pollutant linked to cardiovascular disease. But in terms of like gas and traffic exhaust, it's actually not just PM 2.5, it's other gases. Does that make sense? Yeah.
Yeah, of course. And of course, different origins for these pollutants would dictate that there are different components of those emissions, I guess. So it is interesting for people to be aware of that. And I guess people with predispositions, lung disease, would certainly be tuned into that and would want to be making very careful decisions about where they live, where they habitat, and so forth. Look, we've run about 15 odd minutes. We could easily cover this for hours, I think. It's a fascinating topic. I've cut you off when you wanted to jump into traffic, but what I'd love to do is invite you back so we could talk about traffic air pollution, which I think everyone has some experience with because we've all sat in the traffic. Yeah. But I'd also like to talk about climate change, heat and its impact, cold and its impact, and also mental health as the consequence of climate change on mental health. And if it's all right with you, I'd love to invite you back and we perhaps do that in a second podcast.
Yeah. Sorry, wow, it goes very quickly.
It goes super quickly. Look, I'm so grateful for you making the time. I know you're very busy.
No, this is easy, but I was like, oh yeah, it went very quickly.
Busy in your practice, busy at home, and busy with climate and protecting people. But I am going to wrap it up, and we'll come back and do a bit more because it is fascinating, and it should be an important topic that all of us are paying attention to. So for now, Fiona, I'd really like to thank you for sharing today.
No worries. Thank you again.
For those listening, I really hope you found Fiona sharing as interesting as I have. This is a fascinating space. I'm really looking forward to coming back and sharing a bit more. If you have any queries or questions, drop us a note at info@drwarrickbishop.online. For now, I'm going to wish you the very best. As always, I really appreciate you tuning in. I hope you live as well as possible, for as long as possible. Take care, and bye for now.